Hey guys, we are live. I'm just giving it hair in my mouth. This is how tonight's gonna go. Tonight's gonna be a good one. That's all I can say. All right, I'm giving it some time for Shakti to hop on, and then once Shakti hops on, then we'll share this bad boy. Different background tonight. I finally got some lighting. So you get to see my bed right behind me. All right, Shakti, I'm getting you on right now.
Yo, okay.
Hey!
There I am.
Girl, I'm so glad that with the split screen, it cuts off half my bed. Because I was like, I don't need that much bed.
My whole bed's back here. Just got Buddha in my background now. You can see, you can hang out with him. I had to change. Dude, that sweatshirt was like legit. I'm like, I can't wear this. I'm gonna die of a heat stroke. Especially because when I start talking, I get really hot just from like the level of excitement.
I do too!
I will die of a heat stroke in my massage room. No one will find me.
Well, if I start sweating, then I did not make the right choice. Because not only do I like heat up when I start to channel, but then I have this selfie light right here that's just like heat right in my face.
And it's right now it's creating like Spock brows.
I know, it's like no, hold on. This is the best. I have UFO glasses.
Welcome everybody.
We haven't even shared it out yet. This is the best.
It's gonna be okay. So we're gonna share this out. Go ahead and share it out if you want to as well.
Oh, thank God. The air conditioning though is right there, which is amazing. It's just
that's excellent. My husband believes that against air conditioning, so I might actually die of a heat stroke before this conversation is done.
So clearly I visited at the right time because I would have probably been like, Jay, we need to have a talk.
Girl. Let me just say. All right, shared out.
Okay, I haven't done this yet because also my desk on the road is a cooler. So so I have my what's that called, tripod, right on this cooler, and it's like rocking back and forth. So as I'm laughing, it's I mean, it's just so good. All right.
So before we get started, I'm gonna let Anne share this out, and I want to ask a question to the audience before we're hopping on. So you read the topic of this video, and chances are there have been one or maybe more than one circumstances in your life where you have felt that you were in a current situation that you weren't necessarily happy with or excited about or enthusiastic about anymore, and you felt like it was time for you to shift, but you were also afraid of the uncertainty of taking the shift, even though you felt called to do something else, and so you were kind of living in this tension of opposites for a while. So if you've had that experience, please blast us with some hearts across the screen so that we can know that you guys are coming into this conversation with some sort of like background and understanding about where we're about to go, and knowing Anne and myself, it's going to get hilarious and graphic quickly. So go ahead, share some hearts. Yep, okay, there they are. There they come. All right.
And like Shakti said, if you feel like other people could benefit from this video, share it out. Tag people if you have specific people who you want to be hopping on right now.
Good idea. Do that thing.
And I feel like while we're waiting also, we need to just be honest about what's happening energetically, because I feel like I've been hit repeatedly with an emotional baseball bat. And
oh yeah. Hardcore.
And I'm
First
like,
of all,
I want people to not think they're fucking crazy.
Yeah. We throw some astrology at you right now. Like right now, the new moon that we've just had, many things are happening at the same time. One of the things that just happened is we just had a new moon in Pisces, which is a water sign and extremely emotional and sensitive and connected. And this happened to be an extremely cleansing moon. So there's a lot of like shadow work that's happening right now. Any darkness that you're carrying with you, any heaviness that you're carrying with you, unresolved issues, healed wounds are just rising right up to the freaking surface and slapping you across the face back and forth repeatedly.
Like that fishtail, just back and forth.
Yes. Number one. Number two, in the ascension process of Earth and dimensional shifting, which I haven't talked about in a long time, but I follow closely and I study because it really does affect us. There's a lot of solar flare activity happening. There's a lot of photon activity happening. There's a lot of DNA rearranging happening right now. And there's a lot of sort of cracking open and realigning our story or changing our story from like a body perspective, from a DNA perspective. So this actually aligns perfectly with what a lot of astrologers have been writing about the new moon that just passed. And so I thought I was watching these videos of these people who channel, and they do a lot of like gatekeeper work when it comes to ascension, and they were all saying exactly what all these astrologers were saying about the new moon, the phase that it's in right now. And I was like mind blown by that. Plus feeling the effects of that myself, where I'm navigating a lot of like, my body is changing in really interesting ways, and I'm noticing how much control I actually have on what I'm perceiving, like of my body doing. And like, depending on how my mood is or where my energy is, I will see something different. My body will present something different to me. And also like a lot of old emotional hangups that I wasn't necessarily aware of are coming up, and they're triggering my addictions and my food addiction and my desire for sugar and things that I've been like trying to heal for the past, especially beginning of this year. So that's been happening in my own life. And so if you guys are navigating through things of that nature and you're experiencing a lot of like emotional whiplash, as Anne just described it, that is why. You're not crazy. It's actually happening.
And this is where, I mean, self-care is so important, and Shakti and obviously preach self-care so deeply, but it's like, yeah, I mean, I've been experiencing the same thing where it's like, I have the desire for sugar. I have the desire to snack. I have the desire to say, you know, not necessarily fuck it to my workout routine, because I love working out, but like the nutrition has always been the hardest part for me. And so it's like, it's so easy to be like, oh, well, I was a little off this past weekend. So, and it's my birthday tomorrow. So let's just kind of like, you know, let shit fly. And it's like, no, because it's through the nutrition that you're going to help balance everything internally.
Amen. Amen. All right. Let's get into this topic, because this shit is popping. We need to talk about it.
All right. So we started to talk last week with each other about the pain of joy, and how when you start to feel joy and experience positivity in your life, you start to hit this upper limit, right? We talked a little bit about the thermostat in one of our videos. And so when you have, like, Shakti has been going through, you know, changes in her life, I've been going through changes in my life, and what happens when things start to go well and you start to experience joy, it's like you hit this upper limit, and all of a sudden it almost becomes excruciating. And I mean, I'll let Shakti talk about her experience, but for me, like, you guys know, I live on the road. I'm getting ready to leave Mississippi, and although it's what I've been wanting, right? Like, I've been wanting to leave Mississippi. I've been wanting to like fully live this life on the road, but it's this fear of what if what I leave is like, it's okay. So it's a whole leaving good for fear of, I'm like totally losing my train of thought, right? So it's fear that you're not going to have better than what you currently have, right? Leaving good for great is really fucking scary. And so that's where I've been right now, right? Like, I've had a lot of positive things happen in the last 8 months, and ego is telling me that if I leave, it won't get any better than what I've currently had. That shit's just going to hit the fan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in my case, a lot of amazing things have also happened in an extremely short amount of time. My husband got an amazing promotion, and it's required a huge change in his schedule and in the way our family is now scheduled. My business is exploding, and that's required a lot of adjusting on my end for the demands that are coming in, which is a natural result of having a sprouting business. Mercury is in retrograde, so we're not able to talk either. Giving you a heads up, this conversation might take a long ass time. So also, like, my massage schedule has changed due to my kids' grandparents being out of the country and not being able to watch them. So we've had so much transition and change. I had a nanny. I just enrolled my kid for school. Like, I'm doing things that would have triggered the shit out of my anxiety like a couple months even ago. And so it's challenging me. It's like I'm facing all of these things that I know are going to be so good for us. Like, I know that Jay's new position is amazing for our family. I know that going to school is going to be amazing for my son. I know that it's going to be amazing for me, for my ability to work and do things on my time and take care of me. Like, I need that. I have needed that for a while. And I'm so excited to be able to give that to our family and to like bring this into our life. And I was terrified giving in that enrollment sheet today to enroll my kid in school. Like, I literally had a panic attack as I'm like handing over this enrollment sheet, trying to not look crazy in front of the director of the school, you know, like a crazy person. I'm a normal mom.
You're like handing it over but not letting it go.
Yeah, like holding on to your sheets. She's like, okay. You know, and that's where I've been, and I'm coming to this realization that things are so good in my life right now, and I'm manifesting things that I've been writing about and envisioning, including how many days a week my kid goes to school and his schedule, like down to the T, is what I wrote in a journal that I found today, months and months and months ago. But now I'm hitting this upper limit of like, is this really possible? Like, is it possible for me to have all these things that I wanted? Is it good for me? Is it healthy? Am I gonna die? Like, I literally started like manifesting physical like symptoms of keep my ass down, which is like one of the ways that I self-sabotage is getting sick. I start to make myself sick. And I have this week started to feel sick because I'm having too many good things happen at the same time.
Yep.
So this is my going from good to great. Like right now, I feel like our entire life is upgrading on like a massive scale, and I'm like terrified. I'm terrified of that experience. And so this is why this conversation we felt was important, because we know we're not the only ones. We know we're not the only ones that are having this experience that somehow can't seem to level up, because every time you go level up, you like hold yourself back. Like you manifest some drama, or you get into a fight with someone, or you like freak out, or something happens.
I also want to hear from people, either comment below or give us some hearts. How many people of you, or how many people of you, this is going to be a really great articulate conversation. How many of you are sitting there thinking, well, I haven't had shit explode in my life in the positive sense that Shakti just talked about. Actually, things are kind of shitty right now, Anne, and I'm still terrified.
Skilled.
I'm skilled. No, I'm still terrified. Shit is hitting the fan, not in a positive way, right? And I'm still terrified. Why does that happen? Because you know what to expect when you are uncomfortable. You know what to expect when things aren't going well. You know how to manage shit not going right for you because you've been living it for however long, right? And so it's like, right?
Bottle drop.
So you're like, I don't even know. I don't know what my life looks like if I don't have the financial problems, the relationship problems, the health problems, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what my life.
But it's true.
Yep.
100%.
Yeah. And so you're afraid to release this comfort level that you have, even though it's not comfortable, right? You could be sitting in shit, not comfortable, but it's comfortable in the fact that you know what to expect. You know how, like I said, how to maneuver through it, how to live day to day. And I feel like to an extent, not my life's not terrible by any means, but I feel like to an extent, that's been my end of the spectrum. Like Shakti's been having amazing things blowing up. I've been over here in my dark night of the soul, like what the fuck's happening with my life, you know? But I'm like, but it's comfortable here. And so I know what to expect, living in this bubble, going, like working through my stuff. What does it look like if I'm still having to work through my own shit and I lose the stabilization? So I'm now out on the road and not knowing where I'm going to end up. So I had moments the other day where I was legit sobbing, and I was like, I was pissed at my soul. Like, I don't know if that's a thing, but I was pissed at my soul. I was like, how dare you have such ambitious goals? Because like when you follow your calling, this is also the pain of following your calling, right? When you have such a deep calling that you've connected to, and you can't help but continue to take those steps, you're like dragging your feet, like, oh, for fuck's sake, like, I know that I have to follow this because I'm being yanked, right? I'm being yanked in this direction, but it's so fucking painful. And you're like yelling at yourself. You're like yelling at your soul because you're like, how dare you have such ambitious goals? I hate you right now.
Yeah. That is pretty much me parenting and being an entrepreneur like every day of my life. I'm like, why did I decide to have a child? Like sometimes I like say that to myself, like, why did I so desperately want one? Because I did. I really wanted my son, and I still want my son. I love him, but like sometimes I'm like, really? Like that was what you really thought that was good. You know, and because it's so tough for me, because it's like a huge evolution for me in being a parent, and also being an entrepreneur is the same thing. It's like, why did I choose this? You know, like it's so wonderful, and some days I'm like, it's so soul crushing at the same time. Like you have to grow so much. You like this is not for people who don't want to grow at all. Like you have to be willing to like grow consistently forever, and it's really uncomfortable. But what Anne said about it being when you're in shit and it feels comfortable, what it is it's familiar. It's really familiar. Being in like crappy relationships or eating crappy food or whatever your habits are that are not serving you, it's familiar to you. So even though you don't like them and they don't feel good, they're comfortable because you know what they are. You know, when you don't know something, you automatically have this like distorted perspective about what's going to happen. And for a lot of us, because we all suffer from some level of anxiety, it's immediate like catastrophe, right? Like we project into the future like the worst possible case scenario, like I'm gonna end up in a ditch, or like I'm gonna end up broke, or you know, we just immediately go into the ego starts kicking up all the reasons why this isn't gonna work, or this is not a good idea, or you should probably drop the ambition or drop the goal or drop, because again, as we talked about in our previous video, the ego is invested in your safety. It thinks it's helping. It really thinks it's helping you out. It thinks it's doing something good by protecting you and keeping you in a bubble and not letting you step outside of your comfort zone. But that actually goes terribly against what your soul desires to do with your life. So a lot of times, the reason that I really think the reason joy is so uncomfortable for ego is because it's so unpredictable, right? Like joy is unpredictable. There's no schedule for like joy, but I almost feel like fear and drama is like super predictable. Like it's really
well. And the other thing too is that with fear and drama, it gives us something to fix, right? We all want to fix something. We get into this fixing mode, and a lot of times we will actually create problems in our life because we have something to fix, right? And I mean, I've definitely been there. I know Shakti's been there, where it's like things start to go well, and you're like, well, I don't have anything to fix, and you're so not used to just like being peaceful and happy and like living your life. You're like, let me fuck some shit up so that I have something to fix again.
I'll start a fight with my partner so that I can yell at them and then feel like shit about myself. Yeah.
Yep. It's the highs and lows too, right? That's part of the joy of the human experience, right? Is the peaks and the valleys. We thrive off of contrast, because it without contrast, you can't feel the same intensity of the highs, right? So you need it on some level, obviously, because we're human beings, but a lot of times we end up like throwing ourselves into contrast to give ourselves something to fix.
And I also feel like that becomes part of our identity. Like the shit story becomes a part of our identity. So then when we're like, I want to fix my life, or I want to come to center, I want to heal some shit, I want to let go of this baggage, you like inherently don't want to do that, because you're then going to have an identity crisis. Like, who am I if I'm not freaking the fuck out about money every day? Who am I if I'm not fighting with my partner all the time? Who am I if I'm not shoving donuts in my face when no one's looking? Like, you don't know who you're going to become if you drop these things that have become so tied into your identity. So then, like, you don't want to do that either. That scares the shit out of ego, because it needs to become identified to certain things. Otherwise, it has no existence, quote unquote.
Right.
It doesn't have a place. So.
We also see in movies the hero's journey, right? We see the peak, we see the climax. And so that's modeled so much to us that it's like struggle, 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 and then we overcome the struggle. And I think that there's so much, there's so much excitement, right, in overcoming the struggle that it's like you kind of start to overcome the struggle, and then you're like, well, shit, if I overcome the struggle, then what do I have? Kind of like you talked about, but
what happened?
It's like that adrenaline rush also of like overcoming the struggle, that it's almost enjoyable, right? To like actually take the action towards like, and planning, right? Like, oh, I have this shit going on in my life, but just wait until I make it, right? I was actually just sharing about this yesterday in one of my posts, or maybe it wasn't my post. I was sharing it with my Vibrator Club, and I was talking about how, so I was at this meditation retreat this past weekend. And a lot of people know that I'm on my journey, but I also talk to a lot of new people who don't know anything about me. So I was sharing about the fact that I'm living life on the road, and it's so exciting to talk about what I'm doing, right? To talk about the fact that I'm living on the road, to talk about the fact that I got rid of all my stuff, to talk about the fact that I'm traveling with cats, which so many people don't do. And then the feedback that I receive is like, oh my God, that's amazing. You should write a book about it. I'm like, I'm writing a book about it, but then ego's like, no, you're not. You haven't started the book yet, you know? But it's like so enjoyable to talk about it that then I had that realization of like, I've almost gotten to the habit of talking so much about my life that I haven't been living my life. And that's another area where people get stuck, where it's like, you talk about your dreams, you talk about you're going to lose the weight, you talk about how you're going to start the business, you talk about how you're going to, do all these amazing things, but then you get stuck in fear and you never take that next step. But talking about it is so exciting that you can like live in the energy of it without actually having to take the risk of creating it.
Yes. And that right there is why joy is so terrifying, because in your mind, when you've achieved a certain thing or you've accomplished a certain thing, there's a risk of losing. Whereas if you're already lost, you're like,
fuck it,
I'm already at the bottom of the barrel. We'll just stay here and hang out. There's no loss factor. It's a lot like a baby when they start to move, like they start crawling for a reason. Because if they fall from crawling, the drop is a lot less dramatic. But if they fall from standing, they could really hurt themselves. And so, nature has a way of progressing children to learn how to walk and carry itself around in the world through stages. And so I feel like a lot of times when it comes to us dropping the fear and the struggle and the drama and moving into joy, the reason we don't want to do that is because we're aware that there's a drop. We're aware that there's a gap between here, and we don't want to navigate the gap. We want, and that's man, this is opening a whole box. This is the problem with like not wanting to be on a journey and just wanting to be at a destination. This is the inherent problem of this mentality. And when it comes to weight loss and fitness, which is my primary world and the way that I help people the most right now, I see it all the time. People are like, I just want to lose the 30 pounds, or I just want to whatever. And what I help them understand is this isn't an end game. Like, you can have a goal and that's fine, but your fitness is a forever journey. It is something you're going to be doing forever. It's not just like you get there and you're done. And I think a lot of people are afraid of really allowing themselves to experience joy without necessarily knowing, because they want to just get there and then never struggle ever again. Yeah. They want to just like arrive and be like, a Disney story, and they lived happily ever after and never have to figure shit out ever again. And that's just not reality. Like, that's not true. And that's not why you came here. Furthermore, you signed up to experience the joy of growing out of the struggle, evolving, achieving, accomplishing, and then climbing another mountain. That is why you came here. You didn't just come here to sit on the top of a mountain and be like, this is nice. That wasn't the point.
Well, and that's exactly why you, in the coaching that you do, like, you don't give a shit. Like you said, you don't give a shit. You're not going to help people to get abs or to necessarily hit a certain weight, because it's not about the weight loss. Just like I tell my clients, like, I'm not here to help you get the stuff. I'm not here to help you get the money. I'm not here to help you get the clients. I'm not here to help you. Our work together is going to naturally attract those things into your life, but that's not my sole purpose of working with you. My sole purpose of working with you is to help you love yourself and to come up with a self-care routine that is long lasting. It's not meditate for 3 months and then, I'm done. Like, it's not that,
forever good.
But the other
Yeah,
thing,
I mean, Ed and I in our realms, we're here to help you fall in love with the journey. We're here to help you establish the journey, fall in love with the process, and stay committed to the process. That is what we do. That's it.
Yep.
I mean, that's the secret. People are like, what's the secret? We just told it to you. There you go. Well,
that's it. Well, another thing.
There you go.
The other thing too, I mean, talking about, you know, falling in love with the journey and not sitting, you know, not being comfortable sitting on top of the mountain too. Like I think the other reason people don't take big risks is because it's the fear of perception, the fear of what will happen if I fail? How will I be perceived? Well, that only matters if you are receiving your love and your validation from outside of you. That only matters if you're receiving your love and your validation from your friends or your family members or your partner or whatever. And if you don't have, if you're not giving that love and acceptance and validation to yourself, then you're gonna need that from them, and then you're really gonna fucking care what they think. But if you're giving that to yourself, then it doesn't really matter. Not to say you're like fear is gone, the fear is still gonna arise, but when you can reconnect to yourself, then it's like, oh, well, is this what I want to be doing? Yeah, this is what I want to be doing. Okay, does it feel right? Does it feel like I'm on the right path? Yeah, okay. Do I care if I fuck up? No, not really. You know, like it's worth the risk. And so when you can talk yourself through that, then when other people are like, oh my God, well, what about this and this and this? And do you have a plan B and yada, yada, yada? You know, I make a joke that I'm on like plan Z by now. Like I've had so many things fail in my life that I'm like, I'm out of plans, you know, like there isn't really another plan. This is it. And so, but I'm so confident in that. And I don't really care what other people think if I fail, because I have failed so many times in my life that it's whatever at this point.
I wanted to share an example of, you know, the fear of great, right? And how there can be these really subtle storylines happening underneath the surface that we don't even really know are happening, that are actually keeping us from stepping into our greatness or our level of expression. And it's a personal story of my journey with my business, my current business. I've had a couple by now, and I never got to the point of awareness that I have now. And that's been really, really valuable. And there was one point, it was a while ago, where Ed and I started this conversation with each other, where I was experiencing like these highs in my business. Like I would be really doing very well at a certain period of time, and then I would drop dramatically, and then I would go back up. And so I was very inconsistent in how I was producing, basically. I was inconsistent in how I was showing up in my business. And in my head, I was like really committed and present, and I'm like, I want this to work. Why is it not working? I want this to be successful. Why am I not experiencing a certain level of success? And I started to really unpack that. And it really required me to get still and get quiet and go inside and ask myself, why am I afraid of success? In other words, why am I afraid of joy? You could easily ask that question of anything, really, that you're trying to attain. Why am I afraid of having a lot of money? Why am I afraid of having a soulmate? Why am I afraid of... Because if you're sabotaging something, you have a fear. There's a fear, and it's under there, and you don't really know what it is. So for me, my fear of being successful was really tied into responsibility. I was afraid of being responsible. I had a perception that with a very large team that I had to mentor and a large client base that I had to take care of, I would have so much responsibility, I wouldn't be able to deal with it. This is like the story that I told myself. I am not capable of handling that much responsibility. And if I do get that successful, then it'll be a lot of responsibility, and I'm going to let people down. There it was, like shining to the surface. And then I was like, where the hell did I ever believe that I can't be responsible for one? Like, where did that story come from? And of course, like most things, it came from my childhood and my mom telling me, like, as loving as she is, and my mom and I have a great relationship now, but when I was young, she was always like, you're very irresponsible with money. That was one of the things she used to tell me growing up. Because I like to have experiences, and I would put money towards experiences. I wasn't into hoarding money. That was never my thing. That was her thing. I was very much into investing in experiences. So she judged that as being wasteful, and she would say to me, you're very irresponsible with money, or you're very irresponsible with whatever, even though I was generally an extremely responsible child. But for whatever reason, it was that comment that stuck with me, and I grew this phobia of responsibility, of having to be responsible for things that were very big. And little did I know that trickled so deep into my consciousness that it then became a story I had in my business. And it was preventing me from actively growing my business. And in the past, I would say half year that I've been like really dissecting that, my business has exploded to no surprise, because I no longer harbor the fear of that responsibility or of letting people down. I've stopped making other people's experience of me more important than my experience of me, which is what Anne basically just said. So if you're like, why wouldn't I want to be successful? Why wouldn't I want to have more money? Ask yourself what you're actually afraid of, because there is something in there that is preventing you from that experience.
For sure. And I had an aha moment again this past weekend at the retreat. I was talking to another woman who's a writer, and she writes books, and I have a bunch of book ideas. I'm a writer, but I haven't necessarily like actively started my books. And as we were talking, she was asking me if I was an editor, and I said, no, I'm not an editor. I'm just a straight up writer. And as we were having this conversation, I started to realize that the reason I have been holding myself back from actually starting on my books is because I fear someone editing my work. I fear having someone critiquing my work, right? Like I've become much more open on Facebook, and I'm very, open and honest and transparent, but I also receive a lot of positive feedback, right? And so like on Facebook I do, but writing a book and giving it to someone to say, here, look at this, please edit this, is saying, here, please critique my work. And I had to think back to a time in college where I was in an English class, and I was one of the top writers in the class. Like I did really, really well in the class. The teacher just continued to praise my work. And then over the summer, I started to get into more like lyrical poetry. And I had this poem that I was like really proud of. And he and I had this really great relationship. So I sent it to him, and he just completely tore it apart and just said, like it's not poetry. I mean, it was just like, I don't even remember. I just remember being horrified. And I wasn't even sending it to him to say, here, critique it, but it was just like, it was something I was proud of, and it got torn down. And even though I have so many instances where people have told me over and over and over and over again, you're such a talented writer, you're such a great storyteller. I know that I'm a great storyteller. I know that I'm a great writer, but the fear of handing over my work to have someone possibly tear it down is like, especially because what I'm writing, they're going to be memoirs. They're my personal story. And so it's like not just my writing being critiqued, it feels like it's me being critiqued, right? And so I'm having to look at that. Like I haven't fully worked through it yet, but that was like a big aha moment of, this is what's holding me back. This is why. But I know that it's also, again, like, holding on to good, because I'm like, I don't even know what the fuck this is called. Leave good for great. I like have to keep looking at it. So the reason it's so hard for me to leave good for great, right? It's like, I know that I have multiple books that need to come out of me. Like they're ready to be birthed. And so I have to work through this, and it's really uncomfortable to leave good. It's like, okay, I have to leave just the, writing on Facebook and writing to my Vibrator Club to go to the next level of actually writing books, because that is what, I've had so many people continuously ask me, is this going to be a book? Are you writing a book? Like you have so many stories in you. And I'm like, I know. So yeah.
I have a very similar one with writing, but it's like, it's deep. That's not even one I'm gonna cover, because that one is, it's really in there. But I want to highlight the fact that we both said, even though in her case she had many examples of being praised for her work, in my case I was a very responsible child and was praised for being responsible many times compared to my older brother, who was the complete opposite of myself as a youth. There was just one circumstance that happened that we absorbed, and that one thing became the story we told about ourselves. That one instance. And this happens to every single person, no matter how many times you've been told maybe that you're beautiful and that you are glowing and that you have a presence about you. Maybe you're still deeply insecure about what you physically look like or how you show up in a space, or because one time one person said one thing, you know? And our psyche, it's especially when we're very small children, it doesn't discriminate feedback. From age 0 to 7, it's literally absorbing everything like a sponge. So things stay with you that older, with more development in your mind, you would have maybe filtered out and maybe said, not that big of a deal if you had more self-awareness. But in that moment in time, it became like a statement about who you are, and that really affected you. And then that becomes the statements of who you are for a long time, like well into adulthood, if you're not actively doing the work to grow your self-awareness and pay attention to that trigger or to those triggers, those hang-ups. Which is why we even do these podcasts, is to help you guys raise your level of awareness and understand that you're not alone. You're not the only person who's lived through this. We've done it. We share our personal stories to give you perspective and to give you an angle on which to look at your own life, and to understand that your job is to do this like combing of your mind and combing of your stories, like fine-tooth combing of all the stories you tell yourself about you, because those stories are actively keeping you from making the leap into greater and greater states of being. That's the only thing that's holding you back, essentially.
Well, the thing too that Shakti talked about, I mean, we've both done it, right? But again, like I had a mentor remind me of this, which is really powerful. Shakti had to dig in, right, and ask herself, like, where did this belief come from? Who told me that I was irresponsible, right? Just as I had to look at why is someone critiquing my work? Why does that matter? Why is that a painful experience, you know? And I had to look back at who told me that my writing wasn't good. And so when you have a thought or a belief, or when ego tells you something, when fear starts to arise and it doesn't feel good, remember, if it doesn't feel good, it's not your truth. It is not your truth, right? Truth always feels good. So if you're thinking a thought that doesn't feel good, first of all, you know it's not true. So then second of all, ask yourself, who once told me this? Who once told me whatever thought? Because if it doesn't feel good, it's not your thought. It is not yours. It does not belong to you. It did not originate from you. It's not from your soul. So then when you can pinpoint who once told me this, then you realize it's not mine. That's not my story. It's not mine to perpetuate into my life. And then you have the choice to release it. It's not to say that it's never going to come up again, but when it comes up again, you can remind yourself, oh yeah, that's not mine. Oh yeah, that's not mine. And just continue to release it.
Yep. That. We get so many webinars. So many. And even now, like, I mean, you guys, we have been doing self-awareness work for so long, and it's a daily thing. It's not like we've arrived, again, back to the mountain analogy. Like, you don't just arrive and you're like, I never have a self-deprecating thought ever again. I look in the mirror and feel fucking fantastic every time I look at myself in the mirror. I look at donuts and I don't get the urge to jump over the counter and swim in a batch of donuts. No, all of those things still happen in my mind on a regular basis.
I just made donuts today, so fuck it, right? I mean,
there you go. But still, like, it still happens to us. The difference is we've learned to, which we talked about in another video, we've learned to expand that pause between stimulus and response. We've learned to expand that moment where you have a thought and then you can kind of stretch out that pause and decide how you're going to respond to that thought or that experience. And I think when we are constantly in this reactionary space of just being afraid, like afraid of a new thing, or afraid of making a decision, or afraid of being judged, or afraid of being perceived, it's like we're not giving ourselves the space to ask ourselves really deep questions like, where's this fear coming from? Or who did I borrow this fear from? That's another great question. Who did I borrow this fear from? Who did I borrow this belief from? Who did I borrow this perspective from? You know, so don't just be in the fear and fucking freak out. Like, ask yourself these questions. Make your brain work. Use your ego to your favor, because your ego loves questions. It's always going to go on a hunt for finding the answer to something that you ask. So if it's freaking out, a really quick way of stopping the freak out is to start asking questions, because then your ego's like, oh wait, I gotta go find an answer now. Like, we can't panic. We have things to do, you know? And it works. It works every time. Every time I start to freak out, I just start asking myself like 2 or 3 questions to myself, and then my mind's like, oh wait, I have to go find an answer. And you just do. You know, it will go searching for that response, that memory. It'll go through the file folders of your mind and find like that one memory when you were 7 or 10 or, you know, whatever the hell happened in your life. It's insane how it works, but it does.
And just like Shakti talked about the fact that we're not perfect, which no, we're not, is like makes me laugh to even think about that. You know, the real raw honest truth is that, and I believe that this happens for Shakti as well. I think it happens for pretty much any teacher out there. But as I'm teaching, I'm like, I should follow my own advice. You know, it's like
on a daily basis.
Like,
and I'm like gold. I like really do the thing that I just said.
Because the thing is, we only ever teach what we need to solidify within ourselves. We're teaching it because we're also needing to continue to work on this and solidify within ourselves. And every time a topic comes up for us to teach on, or anytime I'm working with, you know, with the client, I'm giving, you know, guidance, and I'm like, oh man, I totally needed that guidance today. Thanks, me.
I'm reading Kelly's question. What if you have a continuous stream negatively all through your life and even still today? Do you mean like a stream of like internal chatter, like in your mind you've had a long standing? First of all, if that is the case, more likely than not, that was borrowed. You borrowed someone's negative thought process, patterning, belief system, fears, phobias. A lot of the phobias we have as adults, twofold. One could be a past life thing. I totally believe that. I believe that things happen in other dimensions of reality where we exist that really scare us, and then we travel with them for a while until we let them go. But a lot of them get implanted by our parents or like our caregivers. Like we experience them having a freak out about something, and then it becomes like our freak out. It just transfers right over into like me, you know, as a small child. So I want to know if you're asking about what if you just like always have like a negative stream of consciousness, or maybe a negative environment. No, family. Oh, okay. It's negative.
I have a different perspective on this, and this is something that I work on with my clients. So I use love languages a lot, the 5 love languages with my clients. And so I'm someone that I have to constantly be aware of my negative stream, right? My negative chatter. And what I found when I looked at my love languages, my main love language is words of affirmation. So I receive love through words of affirmation. What that means though is that the main way I sabotage myself is through negative words of affirmation, right? And so when I have a negative stream, I have to immediately stop. So the awareness, you have the awareness, right? So it's the awareness of, okay, these negative thoughts are going, it doesn't feel good, it doesn't feel loving. So what is the most loving thing I can do for myself right now? And so I actually have to actively write more affirmations to myself on a daily basis than maybe someone else whose love language isn't words of affirmation. So I would also, you know, guide you to, you could just Google it. It's a free test online, 5 love languages, just so you know what your love language is. And if it's words of affirmation, then it may be a matter of, you know, obviously looking at like writing out what is your stream of consciousness? What are you actually telling yourself on a daily basis so that you can see it? And then start telling yourself the opposite. And every time you notice the negative thoughts, stopping and telling yourself something else. But you also have to, I mean, you can't just do that, right? Like that's a Band-Aid. That's a Band-Aid of the bigger problem. So then my other question to you would also be, what does your self-care routine look like? Are you taking care of yourself on a body, mind, and soul level? Because that's really the foundation to really build upon.
So Kelly is my cousin.
Oh, okay.
And I know our family very well. I am intimately tied into the family dynamic that she speaks because it is mine. And let me just say that there's a distinct reason why I no longer live with my family. Been made fun. Yeah, I know, Kelly. I know exactly where you're going with this conversation, because that was for me too. I was criticized for my appearance, believe it or not. You might look at me and say, what are you talking about? But I was. My grandfather was super harsh with me on my mom's side about being fat most of my life, which is ridiculous because I wasn't when he was calling me that at all. But there's a reason that I created space between me and my birth family. And I love them. I think they're wonderful people. I love when I see them. I enjoy being around them in the moments that I experience them. But I very early on understood that where I wanted to go in here and in my experience of life did not fit well with the model that my birth family had for themselves. And I don't believe in trying to change other people and their behavior. That's just not something I want to ever try to do. So I decided that what I needed was physical space. And that was part of my self-care. Because interestingly enough, as Anna's talking about this, one of my primary love languages is quality time. So one of the ways that I sabotage myself is not giving myself quality time and also not giving myself space. And so in the case of my family, I had to make a very distinct decision to move away and separate myself physically from the environment so that I could recreate my identity for what I wanted it to be, instead of being fed an identity my entire life, which you also have been given about yourself, because their consciousness is not where yours is. You are beginning to ask really deep questions and you're wanting to unpack this for yourself, but that's not where they are. And I know that because I experience it on a daily basis. There are members of our family who do that kind of work. And I'll message you and connect you with our cousins who are on that same vibe and that same wavelength. And I do stay very connected to them. I talk to them a lot via messages, text messages, social media, phone calls, because they connect with me on the level that I want to connect. But I had to make a very difficult choice to physically separate myself. And sometimes people in the family experience that as me isolating myself or not wanting to be involved with them. And that's not where it comes from at all. It simply came from a place of knowing where I wanted to go and who I wanted to be and what I needed in order to be there. And that's why I made the choices that I made.
All right, so I'm reading Misty's question. I have the full thing pulled up on my computer. My $1 million question, what do I want? My ego left years ago to find the answer, still waiting to hear back from it. I literally dream at least 3 times a week with the universe saying, what do you want? I can't give you what you want if you don't know what you want. Utter confusion in my brain. Well, part of knowing what you want is getting to know yourself, and part of getting to know yourself is spending time with yourself and taking care of yourself. And the more that you connect to yourself, so the only time we truly don't know what we want is when we're disconnected from ourselves. And so the only way to truly know what you want is to connect to yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Like that's as basic as I can put it.
And it starts with simple activities. So you might be saying, well, how do I know who I am, whatever. So I'll give you some tangible examples, Misty. Like when I was in my postpartum period and I was like, I don't know who I am anymore. I have this infant that I'm caring for. I'm like a milk machine. I have no identity. I'm disconnected from my friends. I have no job. I was like a mess. I went back and I said to myself, what points in time in my life was I doing something that I experienced as enjoyable? When was I doing those things? What were those things? That's what I did. And moving was one of them. When I was working out at different points in my life, doing any physical activity, I felt better. So I wrote that down. When I'm moving, I feel better. Or like painting, which is another one I was talking to Anne about. I used to paint when I was younger quite a lot, and I did a lot of really beautiful ink work and calligraphy work. I stopped doing that. But I remembered, I'm like, I really love art. I really love visual art. That's something about me that really stimulates me. I wrote that down. Okay? So I slowly started to compile a list of things that I remembered, like memories of who I was once upon a time, of things that really brought me joy. And it's in compiling that and then engaging with those activities that I got to re-know myself, reconnect to myself. And eventually what I wanted began to unfold as I got to know who I was again. But I really had to go through like a very step-by-step process of like, who am I? You know.
Well, and I think too, a lot of times we ask ourselves, what do I want? Or what's my purpose? Or what's my calling? And we think that it's supposed to be one like magical answer. And the thing is, as long as you are constantly growing and changing and evolving, which we do as human beings, especially those of us who are connected on the spiritual journey, it's going to constantly change and evolve, right? So, I mean, I started 4 years ago as a Beachbody coach, and I've come full circle, and I've incorporated Beachbody back into my life, but it's not the primary of what I do anymore, right? So, I mean, my spiritual mindset coaching is really at the forefront. And so, you know, but 4 years ago, if you had said, oh, Anne, your purpose is you're going to be a spiritual mindset coach, and you're going to, you know, be an author, and you're going to do all these things, like, I didn't have the awareness, because I hadn't evolved enough to know that that was at all part of my journey, right? So it comes naturally as well. But a lot of times, you know, we allow fear to hold us back. So we're like, I don't know what to do. So we just sit there and do nothing. Well, just start taking the steps. Just start showing up and taking care of yourself. And like Shakti says, you know, reconnect with yourself and start asking yourself the questions of even going back to your childhood of what did I like doing as a child? I loved writing as a child. So it's no wonder that I want to be an author, you know? What are the things that you love doing as a child? What are the things that, you know, maybe earlier in college or something, you know, like constantly, like she said, just going back to other pieces in your life where you had things that you really enjoyed doing. And as you spend more time with yourself and really connect to yourself, it's going to start to come up. And you're also going to have new things, obviously, that you start to enjoy as you continue to evolve.
And asking yourself, like, what do I want right now? Like, just start with the moment. Don't be like, what do I want for my lifelong profession that I'm going to serve humanity and change the world with? Like, don't go there. That's really big. And it's really exhausting and daunting if you haven't start. Like, don't do that first. You know what I mean? Like, just start with, what do I want right now? Like, I'll give you a perfect example. Before getting on this live video, I was wearing a sweatshirt, and I'm like, I am hot as hell. I do not want to wear this sweatshirt. I want to wear a t-shirt. So I went and I put on a t-shirt. In that moment, I wanted a t-shirt. Okay? So just connecting with, what do you want moment to moment to moment? What do I want to drink right now? What do I want? You know, what kind of feeling do I want in my body right now? What kind of environment do I want to be sitting in right now? Just doing that practice moment to moment leads you to the next moment, and then it leads you to the next moment. And the next thing you know, you're knowing what you want most of the time because you're in the moment with who you are.
And when you give yourself what it is that you want, it builds trust within yourself. So part of the reason too, when we feel overwhelmed or like, oh my God, I don't know what I want, it's like, I can't trust myself. I can't trust that this is going to be the right decision. Well, you can't trust yourself because you haven't been honoring yourself. You haven't been listening to yourself, right? You haven't been, you know, giving yourself what it is that you want. So start giving it to yourself, and you'll build trust within yourself. Then you'll be like, I can trust that I know what I want. I can trust that I know where I'm going.
Amen.
We're so good tonight, Shakti.
Started rough, but we brought it back. Brought it back. For a while there, I was like, I don't know where this is going at all. I don't know if the words are gonna come, if we're gonna like really be able to communicate it all tonight.
I know it. At first, I was like, man, we said some good stuff, and I look at the clock, and I was like, it's 8:15. Wow. I was like, I'm thinking like, okay, we should wrap it up. No, fuck, it's only 8:15. We have other places to go. This is why working together works, because when Shakti's talking, it triggers things in a positive way within me. I'm like, oh yeah, I should talk about that. But if it were just me, this would be a 5-minute video. I'd be like, and we're done for the night.
And over. Wrap it up. So, and also, I wanted to say to Kelly, like, aside from the physical distance, which is a decision that I made, and I know it's not necessarily feasible for everybody who's in that situation, but a very valuable exercise for me was I started to picture the people in my life responding to me positively. So I started just imagining that they would say really nice things about me, or that they wouldn't say anything at all, even better, about me. Or I just started envisioning them how I would like them to connect to me. And I really did that with my parents. I'm about to make a whole live video about my shit with my parents, because I think that's really important to talk about. But I started to see them in my mind's eye behaving differently and being differently towards me. And what's amazing about that is when you start to assume something different about people, it's almost like they are drawn to live into your assumption about them. Like they have to be that. And it's working with my dad right now. Like my dad, I've made a whole video talking about his alcohol problem and all this stuff. And my brother and I got together and we're like, listen, like we need to do something. We need to start like behaving differently with him and like seeing him differently and whatever. And he is turning it around quick. And I started doing an assumption exercise with him the moment that I saw this was going to be a problem, because I was struggling so hardcore inside to like accept this about him, and I was like angry and I was having a lot of like resentment. And so I started this visualization process of like imagining my dad the way I knew my dad, imagining my dad, remembering my dad how I knew him, and imagining that that's who he is now. And as I started to really engage that faculty, it's like he started to, at a distance, change his own life, because there was some way that I was having an expectation of him without him even knowing. And this is the crazy thing. We are all tied into each other, guys. We are plugged in, connected in ways you can't understand. And when you begin to hold other people in positive regard in your mind and start to see them differently, they begin to change. It's like an organic thing. It's so weird. It's so weird how that happens, but it does. So I would try that on. I would take myself on that challenge.
Yeah, I mean, the law of assumption, and then also how you show up for yourself, you know, because I mean, obviously I don't know the family the way that Shakti does, but I have my own experiences with my own family, you know, saying unkind things growing up. And so I have had that negative tape, and I still have moments, right, where I have this negative tape, but once I really started to give to myself and show up for myself and love myself, their comments didn't hurt me the way that they used to, right? And I did the same thing that Shakti did. I definitely have taken some physical space from some of my family members, because for me it wasn't even necessarily anything against them. It was that I needed to find myself, and I needed to find stability within myself, and I didn't feel that I was stable enough energetically and emotionally like at the beginning of my journey to constantly be putting myself back in that scenario where I was being challenged all the time. I needed to like really find my confidence within myself, so that when I go back into that scenario, I can stand up in my truth unapologetically and just be like, well, this is who I am, right? But it takes a lot of practice to get there.
I'm seeing your comment, Kelly. So my question to you would be, this would be the time where you unpack why you're being triggered by that name. So you've been called gordita your whole life, which means chubby or fat, I guess, directly translated. But it's used as like a love terminology in our culture, which is crazy, but it's true. Even with my son, I call him gordo and he's not. He's like a stick. But that's like part of our culture. Like we say that in like a term of endearment. So if it's affecting you negatively at this juncture in your life, when it never has in the past, it's valuable for you to start unpacking the trigger. Like really looking at, why is this triggering you now? If it's never triggered you before, why is it bothering you? Is it bothering you because you're now feeling the dissonance with that term? Like you're wanting to change your life and you're wanting to like do something about this, and so it bothers you because it's bringing that up to the surface? Or is it bothering you for another reason? So start exploring like what that trigger is, because they've always behaved the same way and it hadn't affected you the way it's affecting you now. So you are the factor here. Like you've changed. Something within you has changed. So it's time to really start unpacking that and looking at it like, what is this happening?
Yeah, anytime we're triggered, it's our responsibility to look at why we're triggered.
And it's a good thing. It means that you are evolving. The fact that it bothers you now is a good thing, because now you're like awakening to an unrest that you have within you. That I have many triggers that these videos are helping. Yay!
And I feel like we could do a whole one I mean, you and I both talk about triggers a lot, and I feel like really helping people work through, like pinpoint triggers and work through triggers without going into victim mentality. That would be a good one.
That's like a whole other video.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good one. It's a really valuable one. Thank you for asking those questions, though. These have all really been insightful questions, and I think really powerful questions to address on this video for sure. Kelly always like delivers the questions.
I know.
Like, she always comes on. My cousins, Austin was here earlier. I mean, I swear to you, my cousins are like the best. I have some of the best cousins in the world. And so supportive. Natalia was on here. Her husband, who is my cousin, usually gets on here as well. Just the best.
That's awesome.
Guys. Shout out to you guys. So I guess that's it. I mean,
yeah, unless anyone has any other questions.
Yeah, unless there's any more questions. But we've given you a lot to chew on, so please rewatch this video if you feel like it was a lot. Rewatch it, process it, ask yourself those deep questions that we offered you guys, and really be with them. They're really valuable, and they can take you places within yourself that you need to explore. And share this video again if you feel like it's of value. You know people that'll benefit from it. Share it out. Tag people in it. That's the whole point of these podcasts, is to be shared.
The other thing I wanted to announce, since it's officially up, if you guys want to go back and look at any like previous videos, I know that sometimes it can be hard on the actual Facebook page to like scroll all the way down, or even to go to the videos, you know, section, and because a lot of times you don't see what the name of the videos are. So we actually have a YouTube page, and if you just go to YouTube, it's Relax, This Is Gonna Suck. And so we're uploading all of these onto YouTube as well. So everything is in one place for you guys to easily access. Yep.
So again, thank you so much for hopping on. We'll comment below and say where you can email us individually and where you can find us to work with us in our given realms, to give you some perspective. Thanks for joining us. We're here every Monday night at 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we'll see you next week with probably a topic about triggers.
All right, guys. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Bye.